Welcome to Reflections, the podcast that biblically encourages, equips, and empowers women for apostolic life and service. Here's your host, Dr. Cindy Miller.
Welcome, everyone, to Let's Talk. This is the season for Mother's Day, June brides, and all kinds of celebrations are going on right now. So we are hoping that your spring is just full of sunshine and flowers and presents and lots of good things. Today with me is a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Jennifer McCurrach. And Dr. McCurrach, or Jennifer, she's known to us good friends. We're going to be talking about love and marriage and blended families. So I'm excited to have her. My name is Cindy Miller, and I am the host for Let's Talk, which is a podcast produced by Reflections Magazine. So I want to introduce you to Jennifer. I had to really cut her bio way down because there's so much I could say about her. But let me start with this. First of all, she's my friend. She's also a wife and mom and grandmom. She is a licensed professional counselor, a credentialed minister, church planner, co-pastor, author, conference speaker, retreat teacher, and you have your pilot's license.
I do.
This could go on and on, so we're just going to stop it right there. But we do welcome you to Let's Talk. Psalm 68:6 reads, God sets the solitary in families. So I love the fact that God does not leave the lonely alone, and he doesn't leave the heart homeless, right? I love that scripture. It was given to me the first time I was introduced to it was on my wedding day, and someone spoke that into my life as I was marrying into a family that was being brought together by God. And even though, Jennifer, God is so in these marriages, I was single, never married. I married a minister, a widower, 2 young children. It was the will of God. It was supposed to be, amazing. And then it was like amazing, but not in the way I had envisioned it. Good things, but also I had a real learning curve. So we're going to talk about that. You and David have shared your love story. Yes. How God brought your family together all across the United States, and probably other countries. But would you just share a little bit of your background and tell some of your story?
Sure. So I was single, had never been married, 35 years old when David and I got married. We had known each other for a couple of years, but had only started dating about 7 or 8 months before we ended up getting married. So once I was ready and once God's timing was right, David will tell a different story, but I'm going to tell it. I'm going to tell it the way I want. I'm going to tell it the way I want.
He's not here today.
He's not here. Once God's timing was right and everything really fell into place for me, and we started from the very first date. We were engaged about 3 months later and married about 4 months after that. So when it was right, and it was smooth, and it was easy, and it was wonderful. And he was a divorced father, a licensed minister, divorced father. He had custody of his girls, 2 girls. And at the time when we got married, the oldest was 15 and the youngest was 8. So pretty established family that I walked into as a single young lady.
And it's a different world, know. Even going from dating, it's like, okay, well, I've known these children for a while. They know me. We've been dating. We've done things together. Well, it's totally different when you're all living in the same house.
Yes. What are the rules for that? What are the boundaries for that? This is what we talk about in counseling with people who are going through blended families. You're one thing one day, and then the next day, your entire world has changed, and you don't have that learning and growing period that people have when they get married when they're young and they don't have, children, and they kind of get to learn and grow together. You're kind of just thrown in and have to kind of figure it out, sink or swim, and it can be challenging.
Yeah, so you are growing though.
You are definitely growing.
You're growing with them.
Yes,
but definitely the challenges are there. Jennifer, I'm sorry, I have a problem. Every time we record, I try to cough my head off the whole time.
Okay.
So. Sorry about that. So, what are some things that you wish you had known before you married? So, you were already a licensed professional counselor when you married. You had some premarital counseling. You were doing all the right things, checking the box, but you had some expectations, probably some that were realistic, some unrealistic expectations. What do you wish you had known or wish someone would have told you before the wedding day, before you said I do?
It's as it always is. You can know one thing with your mind and feel something very different in your emotions, right, at the same time. And so I knew that I loved my husband. I knew that I loved the kids. We all loved each other. We got along. What I was really unprepared for in the whole situation were the negative emotions that come with being thrust into a family that you had no part of building. So when you marry into when a family blends, when you marry into an existing family, whether you have your own or not, you're not just marrying that man. You're not just becoming a parent to those children, but now you're dealing with all of the ex-spouse family, all of the additional family, all of the challenges of custody and dealing with visitation and how do we manage birthday parties? How do we deal with holidays? There's so many pieces and components to building relationship with your new children and with your family that I knew logically that those things were there, but until you're in the middle of it and you really start to feel, emotions came up for me that I can honestly say I had never felt before in my life, like severe jealousy, anger almost, because it felt like we couldn't just be a family. Everything that we did had to revolve around these other people that were not in our home.
You were answering to other people, and you kind of, they have a right, but it's like, why do they have a right to my life?
Yeah, and sometimes it feels like their rights took precedence over what we wanted or needed to do. And, of course, we have to pay attention to what the kids need. It's not just about us. And so often, I found myself having to kind of push my own monster aside because I had to be positive and stay focused on what the kids needed. And I don't think as much as I try when I'm counseling with people to explain that, I don't think that you can really understand what that's like until you're in the middle of it. So that was unexpected for me.
Well, and it's shocking because I know from my own experience, I'm easygoing, I'm laid back, and then all of a sudden I'd be having these why am I feeling this way moments?
Yeah.
And so it is such a challenge because you're really struggling, like, who am I in this new family unit? What is my identity? Whether they call me mom or first name or whatever, and I'm wife and I'm important and I'm not quite as important, and
it's a lot
of things come up. So how did you start sorting through all of that?
Well,
I mean, you're a counselor. Obviously,
I am a
you were
counselor.
doing your own counselor, but you're also a real woman with real emotions and feelings. So
I talked to my husband about it. I tried to remind myself, that a lot of these things were not really about me, that I was feeling emotional responses to things that really had nothing to do with me. And then also just reminding myself that what the kids needed came first. There were lots of times where decisions were made that as a counselor, not even as a mom or as a wife, but as a counselor, I thought, this is not a good decision. These are poor boundaries. This is the counselor in us coming out in those situations. Like, these are not good boundaries to have. But I had to kind of put that aside and say, okay, but what do the kids need right now? Like, what's the right thing for them right now? And how can I make this important and special to them, and I'll still allow them to grow and feel safe? And I think that was, there was a lot of self-talk, a lot of talking with my husband, a lot of talking with my counselor, a lot of things like that. But it was good.
You did have a counselor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because, when you're in the middle of the storm, sometimes you don't see the storm for what it is. You need someone who's outside the storm to shed that light. So,
well, and I think too, talking to your husband is so wise, but sometimes they're going through their own
They have their own emotional,
upheaval.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
they might not be that voice of reason that you need in the
yeah,
moment, or that voice of direction
yeah. And
that
he
you
was so
kind of
eager
need.
to make me happy.
Mhm.
But he felt, I didn't ever want him to feel this way, but it's inevitable that he kind of felt like between a rock and a hard place. And so, learning how to kind of navigate that together, that was
And we
a
hear that a
challenge.
lot. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, that's a one-time thing. And
Mm-hmm.
you hear these stories, and when you sit with families that came together, and you hear it over and over, the
Yeah.
same thing: unexpected emotions, being caught between a rock and a hard place, trying to make the new spouse happy, keeping the kids
Mm-hmm.
happy, everybody feeling safe, and this blending, process. They say takes 5 to 7 years, and we want it in like 5 to 7 minutes. I don't know. Have those stats changed? Are you hearing anything different?
No, it's the same. I think one of the biggest struggles, and this was something looking back that I'm glad I was aware of, and I try to make others aware of this as they go into these situations. You can't force family. And when you have not grown up with that family, you have to be patient and take time. Um, I couldn't walk in the door and suddenly become mom and disciplinarian and demand, honor and respect as a mother, because I had not earned that from them yet. And so there were times when they needed to be corrected or guided or disciplined, but I had to I stepped back and let my husband handle it, because he was their father and he had that equity built
Right.
up with them that I did
He
not
had the
have.
years,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so, how do you kind of take that step back? I think that a lot of families do make that mistake. The other parent comes in and says, no, that I'm the adult and you're going to listen to me. And you have not built that relationship there with them. That's why it takes time. That's why it takes 5 to 7 years.
Do you think it's different though? So say in a relationship, and the mom is a mom, maybe has a child or two of her own in this new family unit. So maybe she's already feeling like, well, I'm the mom, I'm the voice, I take care of this.
Mm-hmm.
So, whereas you were able to say, I can step back, I can take a
Mm-hmm.
deep breath, I'm going to let dad handle this.
Yeah.
When you're talking to couples in your office as a counselor and you hear these kind of statements,
Mm-hmm.
what does mom do when she's already the mom, but she's only mom to her one or two or three or five, and
Mm-hmm.
and she's earning that place in their heart still? What's wisdom?
You just have to be patient. And I think that your focus has to be on the right thing. So your focus in those initial years, not just months, but years of building a blended family, is building rapport, building connection, building friendship, being that safe place. There were lots of times that I kind of intervene in it indirectly behind the scenes. I let him handle the direct, and then I would kind of come in the background and do kind of the mom thing, the talking thing. And so when I work with families who both parents already have their own children, I kind of talk to them about, how do you navigate that? How do you let dad be the dad and you be the mom for these kids, but then also kind of come back around and still build that connection and talk to them later and say, well, tell me about this. What was that like for you? Because that's another opportunity to build a deeper emotional connection with that child without trying to step in and be the boss.
Right, so you're
in that
staying
moment.
connected,
You're
but
still
in a healthy
connecting,
way, which
yeah.
isn't putting any walls
A little more
up.
indirectly, a little more
Right.
indirectly. Yeah.
And then, it also comes down to, so David had his way of disciplining for all that time, and not even as in punishment, but just discipleship and their family system. And then you came from a different type of family system. And really, the way you would parent, the way he parented, and we all, everybody could say they go
different.
through this, figuring out that parenting thing, but in the moment, because one system is already established.
Yeah.
What would you say to a mom in a family that the system that's established is just so foreign to her and she just can't identify with that system? how does she not come in and try to redo the system because it doesn't work for her? How do you have wisdom in making soft, subtle changes?
Well, and it's not that we don't try to redo the system, because we do have to adjust for everybody.
You have to create that family system, but
I
not overnight.
And I would say to do it again, kind of in the background, because if he reacted a way that I felt was too harsh, or I don't know, whatever it may have been, I thought maybe we could have done that differently. I didn't say that right then in the moment, and I certainly didn't say that in front of the kids. But I would quietly later, when things had calmed down, say, "So, okay, let's talk about this. So, why did you handle it like this? And what were you thinking here?" And I would kind of gently let him, talk about it a little bit, and then maybe kind of say, "Well, what if we maybe think about it like this instead?" But it was just me and him privately behind closed doors, not in front of them. And so over time,
is so important. There's not a divide.
Yeah, we were still a united front. He was still the authority, but over time we started to see kind of a shift into where we were both more aligned in how it just took time and patience and talking and working together. Now, had he responded differently to me and say, "These are my kids, don't tell me what to do," that would have been very different. Unfortunately, my husband was very eager for us to be in this together and open to conversation. And I was obviously not I wasn't attacking him. I was just working to understand and talk.
Well, and I think probably your training played a lot into that, because not everyone, and you were a little bit older, had a little more wisdom. I think when you're in your 20s, sometimes,
It's different.
you start into things a little idealistically, not prepared as much. And certainly, for everyone who hasn't had counselor training, obviously that would have been a bonus for the whole world if we all went into every relationship with, a background in counseling, but we don't. And so we go into it. And I know in my own life, and I think probably everybody could say this, not just about blended families, but there are times you look at the past and you go, "Man, I so wish I could revisit that. I wish I could redo that day. I wish I could redo that conversation," but we can't. We can't. So what do you say to things like when we're talking and maybe talking to families or couples or children? How do we go back and repair? We can't, we don't do time travel. But some things do need to be repaired. Some things can't be just like, well, it happened 5 years ago, so I'm sure everybody's over it. Some things do need repairing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think can't be revisited? Like it's best to leave it alone. And what are some things that you say, if you can repair, do it?
So I think that this is a place where you have to let God be your guide too. I think that if you really are willing and open to increasing, because my relationship with my daughters, they're adults now, but we're continuing to grow and progress. And so, I pray, God help me to have wisdom and to understand and open doors. And if I see something, or if something's prompted in me, or the Holy Ghost prompts something in me that says, "Hey, this is how this was handled," or maybe you should say something here, I go to them. I say, what, I've been praying and I've been thinking, and this has come to mind. And I look back and I see that this happened, and I'm sorry. I don't think I handled that the right way. I wish I had maybe done this differently, or I'm so sorry that maybe I wasn't paying attention to what you needed in that moment, or whatever it is. But I just go back and talk to them. And if it's not a big deal, then they can say, "Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. I never, that was not a big deal." But if it was, that opens the door for them to say, "Yeah, I wish we had done that differently, but I appreciate you owning that and coming back and saying that." So it's never too late to go back. And I think that if God prompts you and brings something to mind, and it's maybe sometimes those things come to mind over and over and over again, and we continue to
Like
push
it's
them
bubbling
aside.
to the
Yeah.
surface.
I think that you need to pay attention to that might be something that you need to go back and address.
I agree. I think for my own self, when something continues to bother me and I think about it and then I'm like, oh, well, we're all good because on the surface, we're all good. Because I've had those moments where I've said either to my husband or my children, oh, I'm so sorry about that. That's really bothered me. I'm so sorry. And they look surprised.
They
Like,
have no
I
idea.
don't even remember,
Yeah.
but it's been bothering me. So maybe the Lord just allows it to bubble to the surface because I needed to tend to it in my own spirit. And it wasn't so much about repairing the relationship with my husband or my children, but it was about, you're a better woman than this. And, I'm going to allow you grace, but you need to tend to it with me, kind of as a thing with the Lord. So I think that could be it as well. What about those external relationships? I laughingly, I wrote a book years and years ago. It's out of print now, Challenges of the Heart. And I laughingly refer to some people in my life as, I have a set of in-laws and I have a set of outlaws. But, because it's like, how do you really define these other relationships? So we do have these external relationships, extra relationships. You want to talk about anything about that we should be aware of?
I think the biggest key to that is when you're coming into a family, that family already has dynamics in place. And sometimes, in fact, many times at that point, there are probably not some good dynamics because usually there has been a divorce or something has happened. Just remembering that it's not personal and it's not about you. So when people react strongly or with suspicion or whatever it may be, remembering that they don't know you. You're new to this scenario. You're a placeholder. You're an idea that they're upset with, but it's not about you personally.
And everyone has fears of losing, losing relationship, losing status.
Anytime family dynamic changes, people get very uncomfortable, even when the dynamic is bad. We like to keep things the way we're used to it.
Because we know how to function in it, even if it's not a healthy functioning.
I will give a personal story. When my husband and I were first married, very early on, a year or two in probably, he and his ex-wife always didn't see eye to eye on things. They had a hard time communicating sometimes. And so I kind of took over de facto communicating because I communicated with her fairly well, and we were we could talk, and it was agreeable and it was nice. And it helped him to not have to deal with any kind of conflict. And so we kind of fell into that pattern of I was handling the communication about the kids and different things because it was just easier. And she didn't like that. She wanted to talk to him because they're the parents. And she didn't want me inserting because I was new, right? I wasn't the parent. They were the parents. And so those are and those are normal. Those are things that happen, that are going to come up. And I couldn't take offense. I mean, I could have taken offense at that, but I chose not to take offense at that because I recognized where she was coming from, that this was an investment for her. And this was, that was their dynamic in their family. And she wanted to have that communication with him, even though it wasn't always good. And over time that balanced itself out and it was fine. And
because time does allow things
makes a
to
change. Be patient.
Honestly, that's really the word of wisdom for, now if people are in 20 years in a relationship and it's still traumatic and unhealthy, then I think there's a lot more going on than this is a blended family trying to blend.
There's other things.
There's a lot of other things going on. We can't blame just blending a family. But really, and looking at lives and talking to people and sharing the journey with other counselors as well, is that sense of people just don't give it enough time.
Yeah.
They're making decisions a year in, 2 years in, 4 years in, and thinking, oh, it's been 4 years or even 5 years. And he's still not calling me mom or dad, or it's still every visitation, they come back crying and things are hard, and, it's just not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? They may never call you mom or dad.
They may never.
But the name is not what matters. It's the relationship that's important. Yeah. And there's lots of things that are behind that, and that's okay. And just focusing on what's important. I think counseling is huge for blended families. I think that it's important that you constantly have a voice to kind of help you navigate through some of those things. I also, as we're talking about this, the more we use the term blending, I don't love the imagery that comes with that, because I think about a blender where you put all the fruits and stuff in, and it has razors,
I had days where I felt like I was in a blender.
It's like it's chopping everything up. Like I don't know that that's really, to me, it's more like when you're kneading something together, like when you're adding flour and water and dough and you're kneading it together to create something new like bread. I think that's more, because sometimes, you kind of got to get a piece over here and knead it in a little bit more and spend more time, a little more gentle. Yeah. But that's not a process that happens quickly. No. Blending, you throw stuff in and hit it and it's all mixed up, but that doesn't mean it's mixed up well.
But maybe mixed up thoroughly.
But yeah, I think gentleness, being gentle and taking time and being patient are probably the keys.
Well, for women that were career women and they come into a family unit, I think there's a lot of shock factor because, two parents marrying and bringing two sets of children, and there's probably a lot of shock factor there. And
different shock factor,
it has to be huge. But I think that single woman who marries, it's been a career, you get up, you go, you're independent, let's go. And then all of a sudden it's bedtime and eating healthy vegetables and your
life revolves around when people have to be at school.
And it's just so many different components. Did you continue to stay in the field of counseling? Were you continuing into your practice after you married, or did you kind of say, I need to take some time and become a mom?
I initially continued on with everything. And I overthought my ability to do that. After about, I think 6 or 8 months, I started weaning off my practice. And I was working at a school district as well as a school psychologist when we got married. So I actually had 2 jobs and taking on this new role and being mom. So I realized about 6 or 8 months in that wasn't going to be reasonable for where we were. And fortunately, we were in the position where I didn't have to do that, which everyone's not in that position. So I just scaled back on what I did, and I kept a handful of clients so that I could, maintain that peace. But I focused more on my family. I reshifted my attention into building our family until it was where it needed to be. And then I kind of revisited and went back into more career mode. But speaking about going back and changing things, I wish I probably had done that a little bit earlier than I did. I probably should have read those signs a little sooner. But I'm glad that I did it when I did and didn't continue to try to do everything, because I think that would have negatively impacted our lives.
Well, there is that day you kind of wake up and you go, I'm stressed, they're stressed, this doesn't work, because we're ministry people. If you go to church, you're a ministry person. You're involved somehow in church, because that's who we are. And then so you go from being a career person and an involved in ministry of some sort in the church and a social life. And now you're bringing this family unit in, you have different responsibilities. And that moment where you go, you know what, I'm not putting this family first. And it's not me having to give up anything, but it is me saying, I need to reorder my priorities because I can't be going all weekend long, working 40, 45 hours a week, and taking this time to sit with a family and create a growth environment.
Yeah. And we believe strongly in the order of God, family, and then ministry. We think that family is very important. And so And actually doing that increased my ministry. Have taking that time and really focusing on the family and building our family and strengthening our family has impacted both of my husband and my ministry and our kids' ministries tremendously. And so I feel that just proves out that that's the right order as long as we're focusing on the right things. God takes care of the rest of it.
And because you have to say, you know what, for this season, I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Doesn't mean you've lost it. No one's ever going to ask you to do anything in the kingdom of God ever again. You know,
it's a period of time.
It's just a period of time. It's a season of time. But the rewards that you reap are years lasting.
Tremendous.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I want to ask you a few more questions before we have to end this, because time is going by so quickly. Before women, if there's a young woman and she stops by to chat with you, or not just a young woman, any age, and she's dating and considering, a future with a man that has children, what words of wisdom would you say? Think about this. Other than, I know we've been sharing a lot, but what would you think would be important here?
I would recommend that they really, and I'm thinking as you're asking me that question, I'm actually thinking of different periods of people that have come to me in that situation and how they handled it. Be patient. Don't rush. Understand that you're moving into a system. You're not marrying a person. You're moving into a system, and you have to learn how to function in that system. That's part of it. The system is not going to change to meet your needs. You have to learn how to change to fit into the system, and recognizing that for what it is. And are you willing to do that? Because if you're not, that's okay. But you need to go into it with your eyes open. Right. It's not going to change.
It's not going to change. So wise. And to expect that system, the whole system, to change to accommodate your wish list is a little naive.
But people do.
People do. And that brings me to another thought. Like, how does a woman know that this man that she's liked, or maybe it hasn't been so long since the divorce or the death, how does she know he's truly ready to invest in a new relationship, and it's not a rebound, or I'm lonely and or I just want a mom for my kids? Is there any signs she should be watching for to know he's ready for a new relationship?
Well, I would think that timing is probably the first sign. And statistics have shown us that people tend to remarry very quickly. Men twice as often as women. So when men go through a divorce or they lose their spouse, they tend to get married within 6 to 8 months after, which is okay, but it's going to be work.
It's going to be
there's work involved. So, going into it recognizing, oh, he's over her, it's been 8 months. Yeah, probably not.
No.
There's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to come up. And even if he's been in counseling for 8 or 9 months, when you get married and you're living with another human being, there's a whole nother set of emotions and things that pop up that you didn't even anticipate. And so recognizing that that's going to be the case, if it has been a longer period of time, if we're talking a couple of years, which is what we would recommend people wait and really process what's going on in their life before they recommit to someone else, you're still going to have some of that, but it's probably going to be a little less of an impact than it is when it's very quick.
When it's brand new.
Yeah, when it's brand new.
Because it's processing loss, whether it's death or divorce, it's loss, it's grieving, it's developing into a person that has grown past that moment. So if they don't know who they are, then how can they bring this more grown-up version or this different version of themselves, to a new relationship? And I think even if it's been several years, there's still emotions that come up. There's still confusion. It's still a process of coming together.
And you're not failing when that happens, because that's normal.
Absolutely.
Because you don't know what you don't know until it happens.
And to really hold on to, if God brought you together, He is going to help you through the tough times.
Yeah.
and not give up. You absolutely cannot give up on the relationship until you give it time. But, when women are dating, it's so scary, and I certainly don't want to offend anyone listening, but when I hear something like, oh, well, he's been separated, he's getting a divorce, and they already are dating and liking each other, I'm like, oh, wow, that's going to be a hard road ahead.
Yeah, there's some major flags coming up down the road.
Even if, this person has every reason to remarry, give it time, give it some breathing room.
We don't like to do that. And you've got different sets of issues. When you're dealing with someone who has lost their spouse, their spouse has passed away, there's a grief issue. There's grief there. And then there's also this kind of rosy haze that covers those who have passed on.
Right.
So now you're competing with perfection, even though it wasn't, but that's part of it.
Because you can't speak ill of someone
And
who
they're
has
not
passed
there,
away.
but then when you're dealing with someone who's divorced, that's a different level of issues because
a whole other side
there
of the
can
same
be
coin.
anger, there can be
Right.
frustration, there's a lot of other things. So regardless, there's going to be stuff either way you go. And just recognizing that those things are there and, at what level they're going to be there, and that sometimes it's going to be worse and sometimes it's going to be better. And that's okay. That's part of the process.
And just staying committed.
Mm-hmm.
But I think going back to this is a woman who has not said I do yet. I think counting the cost, really looking at the system.
Especially before you fall in love with their kids.
Yes. Oh, don't.
Because that's what girls do.
Or the kids fall in love with with the parent.
Because that happens a lot.
And saying, oh my goodness, this is so not fair to the children.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Like, I really want the kids, but I don't want you, buddy. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think wisdom, but we don't always, when our emotions get involved, have that wisdom that we need. Being willing to listen to voices of people who love and care about us. So if people are saying, if a pastor, a leader, a friend, a sister, someone who really loves you is saying, I don't know about this, multiple voices are speaking into
Or slow down. We'll hear that a lot.
Yes.
Maybe you should slow down. We don't like to hear that.
But it could be God using them to speak a word of wisdom. So even though it's not something you want to hear, slowing down may actually make this a healthier start.
Yeah.
If you could find it, if a person could find it within themselves to do that.
And my husband had been divorced for 5 years when we married. And we had actually gone out 2 years before. So he had been divorced 3 years. We went out, then we didn't go out again for 2 more years. So it was 5 years total. And we often joke around, wish we had just, gotten married that first time we went out. But, looking back on that, although I regret missing that time with my children, I have to trust that God's timing is the right timing. So even though he was Mr. Right, he wasn't Mr. Right then. And then when he was Mr. Right.
That's such a good point.
Yeah, that he was the right guy. We needed to be patient until the timing we were where we needed to be in order to make it successful.
Well, my husband was a widower, and he had been, his wife had died 4 years previously. But what's so funny is, not like in ha-ha funny, but it wasn't ha-ha funny at all. But he was ready. But when people don't live in it every day, so external relationships, it was almost like, she was still there, but on vacation or around the corner in another room. So it's almost like the external relationships, it shocked their system that he was ready and they weren't ready. So I don't care how much you try to do it right and perfect and see the counselor, get the pastor's blessing, God's, hand is on you. There are going to be challenges.
Always going to be
There's
challenges.
going to be bumps in the road. Not everybody in your life is praying and asking to be Christ-like.
Yes.
and their un-Christ-like approach to the new relationship can, reveal your heart. It revealed my heart to me. Yep. The Lord allowed me to see I had a lot of maturing and growing I needed to do in my own relationships. But I don't regret it at all. The bumps in the road, the painful lessons, I wish we didn't have to go through them. But whether it's a second marriage, a first marriage, there are always going to be relationships. And I believe that God doesn't cause people to be difficult, but he certainly allows what happens in our life for us to see our own heart in order to grow in relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately that's where we're all, wanting to head in a better relationship
Absolutely.
with the Lord.
And remembering that at the end of the day, you can't control anybody but you. And you get to choose. Are you going to get bitter or angry or upset? Or are you going to grow through that and become better? Be better who you are.
And it's a choice.
It is a choice. And it's a choice you make a lot.
Absolutely.
Over and over and over again.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, I get to make it several times a day. I don't know. What kind of woman do I want to be? And I love to ask that question mostly of myself. Like, okay, this is going on. So what kind of woman do you want to be? We're almost out of time because it's Mother's Day. Just the very ending, you were a mom coming in. What is Mother's Day? What was it like for you in the beginning, and what is it to you today?
From the very beginning, my very first Mother's Day, I remember it vividly. The girls went out and took pictures and they made me a picture album of them. And it was precious and it was a blessing. And I felt that blessing that God had allowed me to be part of their lives. And every year I have really just tried to be, for me, Mother's Day is about how can I be a better mother, not about what can my kids do for me. And so I've been given this gift to be their mother. And so, and now a grandmother. So every year I get to think, okay, how can I be better at that? What can I do differently? And so I think it was a precious blessing from God.
I like that. Mother's Day as a time of reflection. So whether you're in a great relationship, whether your kids are serving the Lord, not serving the Lord, whether there's multiple people involved in your family unit, this Mother's Day, make it about what kind of woman am I? What kind of woman do I want to be? How is God leading me into a greater maturity? And what kind of mother do I want to be? I think that's great advice. So we are at the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
For telling your story. I really should have David here because
No,
your
you
story,
shouldn't.
Yeah, your story and his story. I don't know. Well, y'all even in the same place. I don't know. He's got a very different one, but it's a fun one. So thank you all for being here with us today. And we hope that we have been a blessing to you by just talking through what we know to be true about God at work in our lives. I hope that you already subscribe to Reflections Magazine, but if you do not, please do so as quickly as possible because you will not want to miss the Let's Talk article that will be in the Reflections print magazine that's coming out. So we have some great resources in our notes section, and there's going to be book recommendations, a lot of good things we're going to be sharing with you there. So visit the notes section. Go to our channel, our YouTube channel, or however you're listening to this podcast, and please share it, like it, comment on it. We want to get this out. We want people to know there is a Ladies Ministries podcast, and it's just for the women of the UPCI, that we're doing this just for you. So please do that. Join us next month. There's going to be another great conversation, and you're not going to want to miss it. So please join us next month. Until then, God bless.